Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and this past week was filled with news about the upcoming iPads, HomePods, a new Apple TV finally, iPhone 13, and much more. This is your news update for the week of April 11th, 2021. And the first thing has to do with Mac shipments. According to new market data from IDC, they show that Mac shipments have doubled within the first 3 months of 2021 as opposed to 2020. So they've sold double what they did last year. They're coming in at about fourth place behind Lenovo, HP, and Dell, but they're selling a ton of these, and I think that's probably due to maybe the new MacBook Air with the M1 chip and this 13-inch MacBook Pro with an M1. They get great battery life, they're the future of what Apple's doing, and they're super fast. So it makes a lot of sense that they'd sell a lot of these. People were waiting to update until they put in the new chipset, and I think we'll see more of that this year with upcoming Macs as well. Recent court documents showed that Apple was talking about iMessage on Android as being something that would deter people from staying on iPhone, and so they decided not to do it. This makes a lot of sense from a business perspective, and I'd be surprised if they brought iMessage to Android, since it's sort of what keeps people on an iPhone. You have iMessage that works across iPhone, iPad, MacBook, and Apple Watch, and using it across all of those devices is something that makes iPhone much better in some ways than Android. And so that makes sense that they wouldn't move that over to Android, for example. So if they did that, I'd be very surprised in the future, but maybe we'll see it one day with encrypted messaging on Android and iPhone all tied together. It'd be nice to see that, but I don't think you'll see that anytime soon from Apple. Let me know what you think about that, and should they bring it to Android in the comments below. Now, Apple continues to work on the HomePod. The HomePod Mini is the latest edition. They've discontinued the original HomePod, and Apple is continuing to work on new versions. According to Mark Gurman a couple weeks ago, Apple is working on a HomePod that could have a screen in it or a display. I mentioned this before, but now this week he's saying that Apple's working on a HomePod that could be combined with an Apple TV and camera for FaceTime calls. And also, one variant could include an iPad connected to it via an arm that would follow you around when you're using FaceTime, for example. So it could follow you while you're on a phone call or a conference call, and that could make a lot of sense if maybe you had a different variant, but that looks like something Apple is just working on for now. However, Steve Moser found code hinting at cameras in the Apple TV code, and that could be what this is. We thought that would be more third-party, but it seems like we could have a HomePod that combines an Apple TV and a camera, and maybe even some more things. So you could have that at home and use it for FaceTime calls on your TV, along with a nice sound system using HomePod. So we'll have to see what Apple actually releases, but they're working on some interesting ideas, and I think maybe a HomePod that's an Apple TV as well, or somehow integrates the HomePod and Apple TV with a sound system makes a lot of sense, but I don't know about an arm following you around. We'll have to wait and see if they actually do something like that. Now, it looks like Apple is ready to go with a new Apple TV that would replace the aging one we have currently. It would have a new chipset in it, and according to some code that 9to5Mac found in tvOS 14.5 betas, there's evidence of 120 Hz display support within the Apple TV, which makes sense if you're using it for gaming, as well as HDMI 2.1 support. So I'm looking forward to that. It's been a long time since we had that, of course, with a new remote that a lot of people are seeing different code about as well. So hopefully we'll have something like that very soon, maybe with new storage options as well. Now, there was a recently discovered iPhone that was misprinted as far as the Apple logo is concerned. It sold for $2,700, and you can see the logo is tilted slightly and out of place. This could happen maybe if the phone was in the CNC jig where it was getting maybe anodized or however they set these up when they're manufacturing them, and it was misplaced. It got past quality control. That's assuming that it's real, got past quality control and showed up as a misprint. This is incredibly rare and something I've never seen before, but some people are selling these on eBay now, so I thought I'd just share that with you. Now, the upcoming A15 CPU for the upcoming 2021 iPhone 13 is entering mass production at the end of May, according to DigiTimes. Of course, we expect a new CPU, just like we have every year, an A14, then an A15, for example, and that means that Apple has finalized the specifications and tooling, and it's just being set up for mass production. That's generally when Apple gets things ready, usually May or a little bit later than that, and then they start producing millions of these to release later in the year, in, say, September, for example. Now, according to DigiTimes as well, they said that the upcoming iPhone 13, like so many others have said, it will have a 120 Hz ProMotion display, and it will be using a lower power LTPO display. Now, along with that, though, because they're using that display, DigiTimes is also saying to expect the new iPhones to use 15 to 20% less power with their CPU and maybe displays overall compared to the iPhone 12 models. That could be due to the upcoming A15 CPU, or also just maybe it will have a larger battery as well to combine for incredible screen on time. I know a lot of people would welcome maybe a slightly thicker iPhone with a huge battery in it, but to have a more efficient chipset paired with a larger battery, as we've heard before, that's coming with the next iPhones, it makes a lot of sense, and I think a lot of people would be very happy about that. Now, there's continued rumors about a hole punch display. Whether that be with an iPhone 13 or an iPhone SE is hard to say at this point, but in order to do a hole punch display like that of, say, the Pixel 5, with a hole punch in the upper left or maybe in the middle centered, you would have to use an efficient Touch ID method, whether that be under the display to unlock the phone or maybe on the power sleep wake button. Apple has not said. There hasn't been many leaks showing where the Touch ID sensor would be, but one on the power button, like the iPad Air 4, for example, makes a lot of sense, but under the display would be even better, combined with Face ID. So it looks like we're going to get some sort of hole punch display, but probably not until next year. It seems more likely. But either way, we may not see that hole punch display until 2022, but some people are saying as soon as 2021. If you look at all of the different leaks from different people, it seems like there's some false information out there as far as when we could expect it. So we don't really know. It just looks like it's a possibility in the future. Now, as far as iPhone SE, it's unlikely that we'll see any design refresh in the near future, according to quite a few people now. We may not see a full design refresh until 2023, where they might adopt, say, an iPhone 11 design, which makes a lot of sense. We have this design along with the previous generation iPhone SE, where it went from an older design and just incorporated newer features, better cameras, better chipsets, and they did the same with the second generation iPhone SE. It makes a lot of sense that they would do the same with the next generation iPhone SE, looking similar to that of an iPhone 11 or maybe a new design altogether, where it would look more like an iPhone 12 after they've used the iPhone 12 series for a few years. So it looks like we'll just get a small refresh to the iPhone SE that will look similar to what we have now, with maybe an A14 CPU in it, or maybe even A15 CPU. So it looks like we may not see anything until 2022, and then maybe a redesign in 2023, but both of them are said to have 5G in the upcoming iPhone SEs. So we could see something like that maybe this year, but it seems more likely next year. Now, finally, this year's iPhones are said to be on time instead of being staggered like they were this past year. According to Dan Ives of Webbush, he said that it should be on time. There does not seem to be any production delays at this point, and it seems like the chipset shortage that we're seeing around the world is so far not affecting iPhones, so we could expect them sometime in late September. However, it is possible we could see a staggered release like we did with the iPhone 12 mini, 12 Pro, 12, and 12 Pro Max, where they staggered the release. I actually prefer that since it gives more time to review them, of course, but having them release over time to get what you really want, I don't think is much of a problem, but I think we'll see at least a normal production schedule this year based on what we're hearing so far. However, the upcoming iPads and MacBooks seemingly have been delayed, or it looks like it's been delayed, since we haven't seen anything about them, and I think we will soon. I'll talk about that in a moment, but that same shortage seems to be impacting the iPads and MacBooks at this point. So we'll have to wait and see what happens with that. Hopefully we'll get new iPads soon, and the new iPads are said to launch at the end of April, or the second half of April, which is very, very soon. I think we'll see that soon, and it looks like we may have dual cameras again, and a very similar design, only maybe a little bit thicker than what we currently have. There's some leaked prototype units or case units that many people get early. I have one here that was a representation of what we have with the current iPad Pro, and it was very close. This one shows 3 cameras. This was the older one, but it came with 2 cameras and a sensor, or a LiDAR sensor. So we don't know the exact look of it overall, but it seems to be a little bit thicker, and it also seems to have a smaller variant, an 11-inch variant, according to this leak from Sonny Dickson, as well as an iPad mini that doesn't look much different. So it is an iPad mini. It was rumored to look more like the iPad Pro, and it seems like it won't be looking that way. So at this point, expect basically the same sort of design overall with some upgraded chipsets inside and a mini LED display. It's said to have a mini LED display inside, basically being the same as this, but that will offer better brightness and better contrast for HDR. So I look forward to those, but we should see those very, very soon. So the new iPads and maybe new AirPods, although there's some counterfeits out there already that look like the AirPods 3 that were rumored to be available very soon. So whether or not that's what they look like, or we just saw the counterfeits all along, is hard to say at this point, but Apple could be releasing new ones very soon, or we may not see them until the end of this year. Right now, it seems like the rumors on the AirPods are very back and forth. So if we see some new ones very soon, I wouldn't be surprised, and maybe the Pros later on, maybe next year or later this year. So that makes more sense to me. Now, as far as an April Apple event, it seems to me that if we are going to have one, we would have invites as soon as tomorrow, with maybe an Apple event the next week or so. However, Apple doesn't necessarily need an event to introduce the products such as iPad or maybe an upgraded MacBook or Apple TV. They could just show the different videos they do and let everyone know about them. So it seems like we will have some products at the end of the month, but whether or not we actually have an April Apple event is still very much up in the air and hard to say. There's been less information about that and less leaks, it seems. So at this point, I'm not convinced we'll have one until we see those invites come out. At this point, I'm just going to say Apple's going to release the products, but maybe not. Maybe we'll get a surprise. Now, as far as iOS 14.5 release candidate, or RC, that's the final version that they released to public beta testers and developers prior to releasing it to the public. It's the same version unless they find issues, and based on what we've seen in the past, it seems very likely that we'll have a release candidate as soon as tomorrow or Wednesday. Generally, we don't see a beta 8. It's very, very rare, if ever, and then we'll see a final version either the same week or the following week based on what Apple's done before. Generally, they'll release a release candidate, and then we could see the final released a day later, 2 days later, or the following week. Apple's been very random lately, but usually it's week to week, but sometimes they do it in the same week. So we could see it on the 15th as a final and see a release candidate as soon as tomorrow. However, it's more likely to have a final maybe next week if they show the iPad, for example. So that seems to make the most sense. And then, of course, we'll see iOS 15 on June 7th, and then a final version of iOS 15 to the public, usually in September. So we'll see iOS 15 Beta 1 on the 7th with some new features, maybe a new control center, maybe some new icons, and much more. So I'm looking forward to that, of course, with WWDC and macOS 12 and whatever else they have to show us. So those are coming very soon, not too long away. Not too far away, about a month or so, month and a half or so. I'm looking forward to that. Now, we're still waiting for upgraded MacBook Pros and iMac, and I expect them to come out at least sometime this year. Hopefully very soon we'll see one variant of the MacBook, and this is what it could look like based off a render by Ian. And we could get a 14-inch or 16-inch MacBook with an SD card slot, HDMI, and MagSafe. And it looks like those will be in these upcoming versions. So I look forward to MagSafe and an SD card. I don't really use HDMI too much, but all of those are very nice to have, and I would expect it to look very similar to what we have here with maybe mini LED, for example. So I'm looking very forward to that. Now, the current M1s apparently can be upgraded if you're willing to risk that and void your warranty, but technicians in China have found a way to desolder the RAM and solid-state drives of the M1 chipset and replace them with upgraded larger capacity versions. So they're able to do that not only with MacBooks, but we've seen that with iPhones in the past. If you have the proper tools and you're willing to void your warranty, or maybe your device is out of warranty, they can actually be upgraded with more storage and RAM. So it's nice to see that you could do that. Of course, again, you would need the proper tools and you'd have to be willing to risk that. So it looks like you definitely can do it. And that's everything this week as far as the news. And I'm really looking forward to seeing some of those new devices. It's been a while since we had new hardware, so I'm looking forward to that. Let me know what you're looking forward to most in the comments below. If you'd like to get your hands on this wallpaper, of course, I'll link it in the description like I normally do. And if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.